happy Groundhog Day, February 2nd. Did he see a shadow? He did. And what does that mean? 6 more weeks of winter? Well, hope you're taking steps not to repeat this day. We typically like to watch the movie Groundhog Day on February 2nd. I doubt we'll get to it today, but who knows. Why do Jews not eat pigs? Why?
God said not to.
God said not to. Why did he pick out the pig and say he couldn't eat pig?
He said had to chew the cud and split the hoof. Is that right?
That's right. Why did he say that?
For our good.
For our good.
Just speculating.
For their good. For the pig's good. Right. All right. No, that's a good interpretation. What's the letter of Aristeas about?
Letter of Aristeas?
Yeah.
Apologetic.
It's what?
Apologetic.
Yes.
How we got the Septuagint.
How we got the Septuagint, yes. Actually, that's the way we think of it, is how we got the Septuagint, the Greek translation. That is sort of what it's about. Most of it is not about the Greek translation, though. It's about some other things. One of the things is this fellow named Aristeas, so he calls himself. Don't know if that's his real name or if it's a pseudonym. Goes to Jerusalem to get the high priest, and Eleazar is his name, and ask the high priest if they can find some guys who are really good at Greek and Hebrew, and some really good Hebrew scrolls of the law so that they can translate it into Greek. So while he's there in Jerusalem, he talks about how wonderful the city is, how marvelous everything is. And he asks the high priest some questions. Aristeas says he himself is not a Jew. So, of course, there are some peculiarities about Jews, and he's wondering about some of these things. And so he says, this is in paragraph 128. You can find this online if you want. It is worthwhile to mention briefly the information which he gave in reply to our questions, for I suppose that most people feel a curiosity with regard to some of the enactments in the law, especially those about meats and drinks and animals recognized as unclean. When we asked why, since there is but one form of creation, some animals are regarded as unclean for eating and others unclean even to the touch, for though the law is scrupulous on most points, it is especially scrupulous on such matters as these, he began to reply as follows. And the high priest is rather long-winded. He starts his reply in paragraph 130. Finally, about paragraph 144, he gets to talking about the food laws. And he says, for you must not fall into the degrading idea that it was out of regard to mice and weasels and other such things that Moses drew up his laws and with such exceeding care. All these ordinances were made for the sake of righteousness, to aid the quest for virtue and the perfecting of character. For all the birds that we use are tame and distinguished by their cleanliness, feeding on various kinds of grain and pulse, such as, for instance, pigeons, turtle doves, locusts, partridges, geese also, and all other birds of this class. But the birds which are forbidden you will find to be wild and carnivorous, tyrannizing over the others by the strength which they possess, and cruelly obtaining food by preying on the tame birds enumerated above. And not only so, but they seize lambs and kids and injure human beings too, whether dead or alive. And so by naming them unclean, he gave a sign by means of them that those for whom the legislation was ordained must practice righteousness in their hearts, and not tyrannize over anyone in reliance upon their own strength, nor rob them of anything, but steer their course of life in accordance with justice, just as the tame birds already mentioned consume the different kinds of pulse that grow upon the earth, and do not tyrannize to the destruction of their own kindred. So he goes on and he talks some more. But so why does Eleazar the high priest in the letter of Aristeas say we shouldn't eat certain kinds of birds? Because they're mean birds. And Moses, God, is teaching us we shouldn't be mean like those mean birds. We should be nice like the nice birds. And so why shouldn't we eat pigs? Because pigs wallow in filth. And we shouldn't wallow in the filth of sin and unrighteousness. We should be holy and righteous like the cow, I suppose. All right, well, so Aristeas has a different view than some others. All right, well, so today we talk about some things about how we approach apologetics, the task of apologetics, and some things to think about in that regard. Well, I suppose I would make just one main suggestion with regard to this task that we have of giving an answer, and that is to be critical about how you do it, to be open-minded as well, but mostly critical, to think about how you approach this task. Okay? I was reading an article recently about the Bible written from an apologetic standpoint, and the author of the article was discussing a theory of the authorship of the Pentateuch. And he reviewed some of the literature in secondary literature, some of the modern literature that says Moses did not write the Pentateuch, and he was criticizing that literature. Well, it became obvious in the course of reading the article that this author had actually not ever read any of that literature, or if he had, it was a snippet, 1 or 2 lines out of it. He had gone to the book to pluck out a line or two so that he could say this was dumb. It also became apparent in the course of the article that he had not actually read the good stuff that you ought to read. If you're going to criticize a position, you should actually read the stuff to see what position it is that you are criticizing. I would say he is approaching his task from a criticizing standpoint, but not from a critical standpoint. He hasn't actually thought through the issues that he is attacking. And so his article ends up being very bad as a result, not very helpful at all, except for us. Well, not helpful for anyone. I was going to say except for those who don't know what they're talking about, but it's not even helpful for them. It would be helpful to present something that was good that would help them understand that. So this is a concern I have for apologetics in general, is that apologists among us sometimes don't actually think very much about the positions we criticize, and so sometimes it ends up looking dumb or foolish to those on the outside and has a negative effect on the task that they have set themselves. So that's one way of thinking about this idea of being critical in the way you do apologetics, just as I think you should be critical in the way you do anything in life. You should think about it. You should pause and consider and read good literature on the subject. But also, and maybe more importantly, is we should be critical in the way that we read and interpret the Bible. Is the Bible inspired? Is our interpretation inspired? Okay. The Bible doesn't have room for improvement, but we do. The way we interpret Scripture certainly does. Who agrees with the way the high priest Eleazar was interpreting the food laws enacted by Moses? Now,
Who was the high priest?
he was a high priest, yeah, right.
Illustration, for illustration, like if you're gonna do like an illustrate like a parable or something, I mean for you know, for like teaching parables, don't be like a pig and walk around in the dirt and sin. I mean, yeah, if you're like a lesson or something.
Sure,
then,
yeah.
Okay.
You could do that.
Yeah.
If the idea is this is what was in the mind of God when he said don't eat the pig, what he meant to communicate to the Israelites was don't wallow in the filth of sin and unrighteousness? Probably not. Is Leviticus 11 inspired? Yes. Is Eleazar's interpretation of it inspired? No. Last night, my 3-year-old son got out of Bible class and had his packet on Nehemiah at Florence Boulevard. They do these little packets at the beginning of each month, and he is studying Nehemiah, and so we have some songs from Carol Medley, who has written these songs for us, and we're supposed to sing these songs with Josiah, our son, during the course of this month on Nehemiah. And one of the first sheet says his memory verse, and says the point of studying Nehemiah is this. This is what we're going to try to get out of it. And point number 2 was they're going to talk about how they need to build walls of good works and righteousness to protect them from Satan. All right, is that a good point to make out of Nehemiah, I suppose? Is that what Nehemiah is talking about when he's building the wall of Jerusalem? That communicates to us that we need to build walls? No. Now, it makes a point. There's an application there. That's fine. But that's not actually what the text is meaning, what God means for us to understand by Nehemiah building the wall. It actually is this other thing. Why could the Jews not eat pigs? Now, I've heard some people say the reason is for the health of the Israelites. Have you heard this as well? Now, is this accurate? In a sense, people use it to defend the Bible as scripture because Moses did not know that the pig was actually bad to eat, I suppose. He didn't know it was unhealthy, but we know that now. So, so this is pre-science. This is inspiration. God knew it was unhealthy. Well, of course, is a pig unhealthy to eat? Has anybody eaten pig in the past couple of months?
Yeah, about an hour ago.
Okay. Oh, okay, bacon. All right. So is the pig unhealthy to eat? Bacon is, I think, but for different reasons, I suppose. Good for you, protein. Okay. Is pig unhealthy?
Not if you cook it right.
Not if you cook it right. Okay.
Chicken
So what do you
nuggets is a
need?
real thing.
What do you need to eat pig? You need
Properly cooked.
fire, right? Israelites have fire? Yes. Okay. Why is the lizard unclean? I heard somebody say the lizard is unclean because the salmonella in the lizard. And if you don't properly cook the lizard, you'll get salmonella and you'll get sick. And this is, of course, a bad thing. So God was keeping the Israelites away from salmonella, which is in the lizard, the iguana or the chameleon, I forget which exactly one. What else do you know has salmonella in it? Anything else? Lizard, the only thing on earth that has salmonella?
Chicken.
Chicken has salmonella. Israelites eat chicken? Yeah, yeah. I went to a Jewish school. They were eating chicken all the time. That's the only thing they could eat, just about. Yeah, they're eating chicken. It has salmonella too. Okay, if God outlawed the lizard because of salmonella, why didn't he outlaw the chicken? Let's approach the interpretation of the Bible critically. Let's think about the interpretations we offer. If we are trying to defend the Bible based on these types of reasoning, let's read the whole thing and try to figure out whether or not we are correct. On the whole of it, I sort of like Eleazar's interpretation better than this pre-science interpretation. I think it's at least got a little bit more, I don't know if credibility is the right word, but at least moral lesson to it than saying that the food laws were enacted in Leviticus 11 because of pre-science, or that we'll get sick if we eat the things that are outlawed, and we won't get sick if anything has to be cooked, right? It doesn't matter if it's clean or unclean, you got to cook it. You don't want to just bite into a cow. You want to cook it first. So we should read the Bible critically and always be willing to revise our interpretations if we find that our interpretations are in error or need revising. And again, the only way to really do that is to be open to the criticisms of others. That doesn't mean receive them gullibly and just change our interpretations for any reason whatsoever, but at least hear the criticism and try to think through it critically and apply it and see if, be like the Bereans. Have I used this illustration before in here? What did the Bereans do? They were more, what?
Fair-minded.
Fair-minded, noble-minded. And why is that?
Search the scriptures daily
Why?
to see if things
To see if the things were so. That is as opposed to the, who? Thessalonians, who did what?
Responded, I guess.
No, they did the other thing. They just rejected it. They said, nope, you're wrong. I'm going to stay with my interpretation of the Bible and not listen to you, Paul. Now, I think sometimes that's what we do to people who are interpreting the Bible in a different way from us. We say, no, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm not going to listen to you. We are like the Thessalonians, not noble-minded. We are not searching the scriptures daily to see if these things are so. We're just closing it off, saying, I'm right, you're wrong, that's all there is to it. I might, if I feel like it, prove to you why you're wrong, but first of all, you have to admit you're wrong and I'm right. Okay. Well, I suppose that's all I wanted to say. Yes, Eric?
How does the documentary hypothesis present a positive spiritual value to Christians?
I don't know. It's a good question. Anybody else?
Well, I think in response to that, it's important to actually figure out what the facts are before you start spiritualizing.
And what is good literature?
Yeah, that's something we might talk about. What is good literature? What makes an expert? All right, good literature is often written by experts, not always. What makes an expert?
Put the time in, it's,
Time to do what?
study the subject.
How?
School, hands-on experience, they're gonna study, Jewish traditions or whatever. They might go to a Jewish seminary school. They might go to Jerusalem and live in that environment for X time
yeah.
to gain experience.
First-hand knowledge of the subject.
I think we understand this in some areas of life, but others we don't. I mean, who in here wants me to do open heart surgery on you?
Yeah.
You know, we appreciate it, stuff like that, but oftentimes we don't necessarily apply that rationale
Yeah.
to everything.
I have, I enjoy studying American history, especially Revolutionary period. I've read a couple of books on that. Read a couple of books. Am I an expert? No. I've read a couple of books. Now, how many times have you heard somebody say, on the Bible, I've read a couple of books on this, so I know what I'm talking about. Now, that happens all the time for the Bible. Now, I've read a couple of books on the Revolutionary War, and none of you would say that makes me an expert. It means I know maybe something about it. How do you become an expert on the Revolutionary War or on American history? Well, you have to actually read the documents that were written at that time. You have to actually read the letters of George Washington. Probably not just once. You have to actually read the letters of John Adams, the writings of Ben Franklin, and James Madison. You know, if you want to be an expert on the origination of the Constitution, you would actually need to read the Federalist Papers all the way through, and probably not just that, but a lot of the literature that has been written on the Federalist Papers since then. Eric's question was, what makes good literature? It's hard to write good literature if you haven't actually immersed yourself in the sources, I think. Then, if you haven't done that, you are just sort of regurgitating what you've heard, I think. And it might be right, it might be wrong, but really we have no way of telling if you haven't actually done the study yourself. So, yes, I would encourage you to read good literature written by people who have immersed themselves in the sources of our faith.